We believe that we all come from universal consciousness, one mind. So, in that description, we don't conflict with religion. Religion says we're all part of God. It's just terminology. What is God? Well, nobody knows that for sure. In our research, that's universal consciousness.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life once again this week. If you enjoy our conversations, remember to subscribe, share with a friend. Today, we are talking about talking to the other side. I have Tony Rathman here with me. Tony is an ITC researcher and the creator of the Stadicom technology. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this conversation and explaining what Stadicom's capable of doing.
Well, let's start at the beginning and tell us what ITC is.
ITC stands for Instrumental Transcommunication. So basically, what it is trying to communicate using electronic equipment. When the term spirit communication first came out, everything was referred to as EVP, or electronic voice phenomena. It wasn't until years later that a gentleman by the name of Ernst Sinkowski said we need to create a different term where EVP is record and review, meaning you take your digital recorder, you place it down, you turn it on, you ask a bunch of questions, then you take it home, review it, amplify it, whatever you need to do to clear it up. Where ITC was designed for two-way communication, meaning I could ask a question, get a response, and then keep that conversation going. So that is the real difference between EVP, record and review, and ITC, two-way communication.
And how long have you been working with this technology?
This particular technology coming up on about 4.5, 5 years for Stadicom, but we've been doing ITC research both with EVP and ITC for about 15 years now.
And so, what's the interest for you? Why are you spending so much of your time here on Earth trying to communicate to the other side?
Well, I was a complete skeptic 15 years ago. I did not believe any of this. It was my wife who, when television shows started coming out, she started watching them. She'd say to me, "Come on, you have to see this. You'll love it." I'd last about 2 minutes. I'd look at her and go, "None of this is real. This is for entertainment only." And I'd walk away. Well, 15 years ago in 2010, on Valentine's Day, she tricked me. And we would normally, go to a hotel, hang out, have some drinks, have a good dinner. And she said, "I want to do something different." I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She goes, "I want to go ghost hunting." And I was like, "Oh, kidding me." Well, I had two choices. I could take her or I could have her mad at me until next Valentine's Day. Didn't want that. So I took her. And to make a long story short, we went, I bought her some inexpensive equipment, digital recorder, night vision camera, and EMF meter, because that's what I saw when she had me watch the shows, and we went. But when she got the stuff home, she had a great weekend. That was all I cared about. When she got the stuff home and started reviewing it, what fascinated me was it was 3 a.m. We were in the basement of this hotel. There was no one else around. But the fact that we were asking questions and could get a vocal response with timing and relevance and intelligence answering what we asked, that blew me away. My father was a physics professor, so growing up, everything was science-based. This blew my mind. So I tried to debunk it, spent like a month trying to debunk it. Finally, I said to my wife, "Let's go back. There's got to be a vent where voices were coming through from somebody's room." There wasn't. And we ended up coming back the second time with even more responses. Now, this was fascinating to me because the thing about vocals was that even before I listened to what they said or what they answered to my question, I could tell if they were male or female. I could tell if they were an adult or a child. I could tell what language they were speaking. I could tell if there was some sort of territorial accent or dialect when they spoke. I could tell their emotional state. Were they happy? Were they angry? Were they upset? Were they irritated? All before I even listened to the answer. That to me was a bucket load of information handed to me before I even heard the response. And that was unmatchable to us, to any other piece of paranormal equipment or evidence that could be captured. And so it started us down that road. Like I said, we did EVP research, we still do, then into ITC, and we focused on communication. EVP has been known to be around since the single wire recorder. EVPs have been captured on every electronic recording device man has ever made. They've also been captured through cell phones, computers, television. White noise was always one factor in getting voices to come through. So we focused on that when upgrading from direct radio voice to Stadicom, and has brought us basically where we're at today with Stadicom 3.0.
What's really amazing is that you and your wife had no experience whatsoever. You were total novices, and yet you were able to get enough of a results that it actually shifted your belief in the whole thing.
Right. And as we worked through devices that were available on the market, digital recorders, but digital recorders are really hard to hear. The voices are whispery. You run the skepticism from scientists and academia saying it's pareidolia. You're hearing warbles and artifacts of sound. Your brain's trying to pattern recognize what you're hearing, makes you think you're hearing speech, which is a perfectly legitimate response because pareidolia is a phenomenon that exists. And then with ITC, because most of them were radio based, they would say, you're trying to tell me you're getting answers from the other side, but you're using a device as your base equipment that is used to take RF signal in the atmosphere and convert it to speech. How can you tell reception from deception when getting a voice? Whether is that, it's stray radio, which again was a perfectly good response because it's true. So we knew we had to do two things. We knew we had to clear the voice, so anyone who heard it heard the exact same thing. And we knew we had to do it without the use of a device that brings human speech into play. And that's what we did.
I would suspect that some of our listeners have probably heard something similar. Would you be able to play us a clip so they'll have an understanding of what we're talking about?
I certainly can. What they're going to hear, though, isn't probably anything like they've heard before because it's different. So let me just preface this clip before I play it. One of the questions we wanted to know, and in version 2.0, we asked a lot of scientific-based research questions. But one of the things I wanted to know was, how do they hear me speak? If I'm human and I'm using vocal cords to produce sound waves in the atmosphere, another human standing within the range of my voice, the follicles in their ear will vibrate. That vibration gets transferred to the liquid center of the ear, which then that vibration goes to the brain. The brain says, okay, this is speech. I got to understand what's being said. But if a spirit is no longer embodied in human form, and I'm producing vocal sound waves and they don't have ears, I wanted to know, how do you hear me speak? So that's what I'm going to play. That's the question I ask. Okay, so hold on, let me share this. So like I said, I wanted to know, how do you hear me speak? Because they don't have ears and I'm creating vocal sound waves. So here's that question and here's the answer they gave.
How do you hear me speak?
So clear speech. The answer was given with timing and relevance to the question that I asked and with intelligence. We call it death is what they said. So basically that's our understanding that they've transitioned from being human over to the other side. And one of the things we always noticed when doing EVP work was that a lot of the times the answer would show up on the recorder before I even finished asking the question, which means they don't need me to vocalize it. It is energy of the mind, or what we believe to be consciousness, connecting to universal consciousness, which is where they are, and passing that information back and forth. So it has nothing to do with my speech at all. It's me thinking it.
And that's probably why the power of prayer is so phenomenal, right?
For a lot of reasons. One, I mean, when we started realizing that, oh my gosh, this works, we believe consciousness survives death, but that we had to take a step back and literally reevaluate what we believed life to be and how it worked, not only here on the 3D world, but how we theorized it worked in the afterlife as well. And life is purely mentation or mental processing. Everything you experience, you do mentally. You experience it, and then after that, only then after the experience can science measure and determine specific aspects of it. But the experience has to come first. And in order for the experience to come first, that means consciousness has to precede the experience. If you weren't conscious, you couldn't have the experience. So that means consciousness is the ontological primitive, or the primary aspect of life, and everything derives from it.
So, in actuality, your research is providing so much more information than just, are there spirits and can we communicate with them?
Correct. I mean, there's questions that come up like, if spirits are not contained by the human construct of time and space, and we don't believe they are, then they can be anywhere. And we also believe the entire universe and everything in it is also derived from consciousness. But if I can ask a question without using a mic or radio wave to project my voice, and they're answering from wherever they are, they don't have to be next to me in my house to reply, then what kind of transmission is that? How is that getting there so fast? Could that change internet speeds? Could it open up levels of data communication that we haven't even thought of? So the information, the understanding, and the onion layers of information that can be discovered is huge.
So when you're actually doing a session, a spirit session, you're not putting the call out to the universe to speak with a specific person, or
we can.
You can. Okay. But you don't always, and just
we don't always.
Spirits just show up.
They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They are there every time we turn it on. And we don't have to ask questions either. We can just listen to them talk to each other.
And they know you're listening.
Yeah, they do. They do now.
How many spirits are with us right now?
300.
300? Did you say 300?
So interesting. So would you think it's safe to say that here we are in the 3D world, that there are spirits around us all the time?
Without a doubt. There are also radio waves around us all the time, but we don't hear them. Why? Because the human body and our five senses can't pick them up. It takes an electronic device, a radio, in order to take those frequency vibrations and tune in to one of them. But there are hundreds of radio stations going by you. The radio is tuned to a specific frequency to bring that speech or music in. The human body is the same way. We are designed to be at a specific frequency, to be on the 3D world, and to be able to adapt to our environment without getting hit by a bus or, any other tragedy. But if that frequency can be changed, could we be able to pick up communication? Yeah, I think we can. I believe that's how psychics and mediums get their information. It is of the same nature that Staticom is using. It's just we're doing it with electronics to be able to hear the response directly rather than having a third party interpret what they got and then reinterpret it back to an audience or to an individual. You can hear it directly.
And so when you're communicating with a spirit on the other side, they have a personality that comes through, right?
Absolutely. We've had people identify past loved ones by voice.
And so they're crossed over. It doesn't necessarily mean they're ascended to some higher level of consciousness per se. They're still carrying some of that personality and their expression that they gave while they were here on Earth.
Well, those are great questions. We believe that we all come from universal consciousness, one mind. So in that description, we don't conflict with religion. Religion says we're all part of God. It's just terminology. What is God? Well, nobody knows that for sure. In our research, that's universal consciousness. When we are alive here on Earth, we're a fractal portion of it, meaning we're still connected to universal consciousness, but we're a fractal portion living a life here on Earth. Why is that important? Well, as I was saying before, if all of life is mental and subjective to me alone, where does the meaning of life come from if it's all subjective to me? Well, if I'm still connected and part of universal consciousness, and every other person on the planet is connected back to universal consciousness, that means we're all one in the same. And if universal consciousness can get an understanding, like if I do something crazy and anybody around me who sees it or experiences it, they're all going to have a different perspective of what happened, whether it was right or whether it was wrong. That's how we believe universal consciousness grows, because a single mind couldn't expand itself. It can only expand and grow through the presence of individual perception and understanding. So that communication, that information exchange is how we believe. Now, could we be wrong? We could. But based on our research and everything that's coming in and how it fits together, that's what we believe at this point.
So for a guy who, say, 15 years ago had zero belief in any of this stuff, to start recounting some pretty deep and profound spiritual understandings, all of this has come through your research and your communication with the other side?
Correct.
That's pretty
Correct.
amazing. Yeah.
Well, it literally was life-changing. I mean, the things that they've said, the things that they've known. I mean, I can say 2 weeks ago on a Thursday afternoon, what was I doing? Or what was I working on? Or what was I worried about? They can tell me right to word for word. What they can't do is give us future. Anything in the past, they will give us because it's already happened, it's already occurred. Now, we call these universal laws. We think that universal consciousness does not allow them. And when I say them, people say, well, if they return to one mind, how is there still a them? Well, that one mind can differentiate itself into the individual we're asking for with the voice that they had, the accent that they had. And I've got a clip that can show that.
Can you say Tony? Did you just say Rathman? Yep. So you know who I am. Can I know who you are? Yes, sir. Thank you. Who am I speaking to?
That's super important because it portrays the fact that that information is collective. And when people say, well, you think you're talking to a spirit from the 1800s, but you're asking them to speak into a digital recorder, they wouldn't even know what that was. Not during that life, they wouldn't. But when they return to universal consciousness, it's all knowledge of every life, of every portion of the universe and everything surrounding it. They would have that knowledge.
Tony, have you had a spirit make a reference to one of their prior lifetimes, like reincarnation?
Well, the problem with human language is that the language, by definition, causes things to be interpreted incorrectly. Like if I say the word fist and show a fist, people are like, "Yep, that's a thing. That's a noun. Where'd it go? Fist is gone." So that's the problem with language, is that it brings in interpretations that aren't really accurate. And that's what we try to avoid. The fist isn't a thing, it's an action. Kind of like if you threw a stone into a lake and it produces ripples, those ripples can be measured for height, speed, velocity, but you can't remove the ripple from the lake, meaning it is just an action of the lake in response to the pebble being thrown in. That is how we believe life works. So for materialistic science, trying to say, all the neurocorrelates in the brain, they're producing consciousness based on these. No, we believe that consciousness stands on its own and the brain is a mediator or a valve of consciousness and a restrictor to the human life or 3D form to block out everything else that's occurring. So we don't get confused or overwhelmed.
So, no mention of past life experiences.
We've asked about whether reincarnation occurs. They have said, yes, it does. It is by choice of you to do it and when to do it. But we've never had anybody talk about past lives, because if everything's mental, the whole construction of time and space doesn't exist. So a past life is no different than any other experience on this side or the other side.
Exactly. And it's so interesting to me because if time doesn't exist, and yet these spirits can go back 2 weeks and tell you what you were doing or what you had for dinner. So it doesn't exist. And yet there's some sort of organizing principle that allows them to pinpoint that particular experience to communicate to you.
Well, I don't believe it's a matter of time travel. That experience I lived through, I experienced. That experience is thought. That thought returns to universal consciousness and stays there. So we believe it more to be them just sorting through and pulling it back.
That actually is very profound, Tony, and
Thank
something
you.
for all of us to take into account, that your thoughts don't just stay in here. They go
No,
to the universal data bank and
correct.
they're there for everyone.
Correct. The saying was always out there that thought becomes reality. That is more true than anybody can even imagine, and what that ability has. The last upgrade we were doing, I literally put it in my conscious mind, my subconscious mind, that I was going to get an upgrade from 2 to 3. Did I know exactly how that was going to occur? No, but I was so convinced in my own thought process that I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And it happened. Now, are there other variables involved? Of course there are. Did I do research on certain physics principles and other stuff? Of course I did. But everything just flowed together. And that thought process of saying, I'm going to do this, that's how thought becomes reality.
The power of intention.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you ever hear anything from the other side that really really surprised you? I know this whole thing surprised you when you started, and your mind is probably pretty open now to unlimited possibilities. But is there something that just came out of left field that you had no idea, and now you believe it?
I could probably talk for hours on that one question alone, but I'll keep it short. But yes, things like hearing him say, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy.
They don't have a body, so why would they be hungry? I might understand the desire to have a taste of something that they had while they were on Earth.
Right. But again, if you look at life, even as our life here, as everything is mental, is when I cook that steak, is that steak actually what I see and perceive? Are those tastes consciousness putting information into our brain and making me think it tastes the way it does, the texture of it? Why couldn't they do that? Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Energy, frequency, and vibration makes up everything. The furniture I sit on, the mental thoughts of what's going on. It explains the emotional state of things that science can't measure or understand. The depth of my love, the taste of chocolate, none of that science can touch. But consciousness gives that impression that I'm enjoying that. Why couldn't a spirit whose energy, frequency, and vibration think, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to have a nice steak? They could.
And does that steak that you're cooking for supper even exist, right?
Correct. I can only see it through my senses. I can't experience it through yours or my wife's or anybody else's. Does it look the same? When I say, hey, look, it's the color red, and my wife says, yeah, it's the color red. Is her red my red? No idea. Won't ever know.
I have long thought that people see colors differently. I know for myself, I'll say, this is gray. My husband will say, no, it's beige. But it's just the interpretation of the color is a little different.
Right. And it's the same thing with language and trying to break apart what we did with this and explain it in a way that doesn't become more complicated.
It's really fascinating.
People say, well, how do you know who you're talking to? Well, fact of the matter is we don't. How do you know a spirit's not lying to you? Well, after 15 years of doing this, we don't know who we're speaking to. We can get information. We can ask questions. When did you live? Who was president when you died? And sometimes they'll answer. And that gives us a better indication. But about 92% of the responses that we were given that we could research were absolutely correct. The other month or two ago, my wife wasn't feeling well and she said, something's wrong. I'm in real pain. I had Staticom running and I said, is my wife getting ill? And they said, yes, it's possible. And I said, what should she take? And this word came flying out. I didn't know what it was, but the word was Percodan. Didn't know what it was. Looked it up. It is a prescription strength pain reliever, combination of oxycodone and aspirin. Right on target for somebody who's in pain. I didn't even know what it was until I looked it up.
So, Tony, what's the end goal here? Is this just to expand your understanding of consciousness, or are you actually trying to prove something?
A little of both. I mean, EVP and ITC have been around a long time, but has never been taken seriously. So the first proof was to take a method, and we started with what was called direct radio voice, and prove to us that it worked. We did that. Then when we started getting in-depth information, then it leaned more towards proving that consciousness survives death. Then it has shifted not only to that, but to prove that not only does it survive, but you can communicate with it. And then from there, the umbrella opens immensely to what can we learn? What are they willing to share? What are they not allowed to share? And that's where I was saying about what we call universal laws. There's paths they can't go down. Trust me, my wife and I have asked for the winning Powerball numbers for the last, I don't know how many years. it's dead silent. They will not spit out a number, not a 1, because we believe they can't interrupt the life that you were set here to live, learn, and grow. I mean, if I won the Powerball, I'd probably be sitting on my own island fishing all day, not working on this and not growing with how I was supposed to evolve.
Not expanding universal consciousness.
Exactly. That's exactly right. But yeah, and there's so much stuff left to learn. And people always say, well, did you ask how the pyramids were built? Did Atlantis exist? There are hundreds, millions of questions that I could literally night after night ask and see what kind of response I got. But we have to stay focused on A, the development of the method, and B, the research of it, and progressing it. And in order to balance that, it's tricky, because do I want to know all those answers? I do. But once we get it verified and being able to maybe put it out for others to use, they can ask those questions and hopefully grow individually and from universal consciousness.
So I would imagine that the scientific community is not really on board.
Not the materialistic science. The ones that have branched away with it in the last 5 to 8 years and expanded going into consciousness research, they're a little more open. And we did a presentation for the Foundation of Mind Being Research, and it's nice to see that. But your strict physics, materialistic science, they're much tougher. I wrote to one saying, hey, let me show you this. I will bring it. I will demonstrate it. And he basically wrote back and said, sorry, I'm not a believer. My brain dies, body dies, life's over. And I'm like, okay. Because it's not my job to convince anybody either. And we stopped that 12 years ago. We will show what we can capture, and what someone does with it and how they take it, that is completely up to them.
So true. You believe or you don't, and it's you who makes a transition, let's say, into becoming a believer.
Correct. And we also think it has a lot to do with, we were talking about reincarnations. What life number is this? What did I learn prior? Am I on this path because this is what I'm supposed to expand and grow and understand? I think yes. Could I be wrong? I could, but it's fitting for how I got into this, how it evolved, where it's going. And, someone who's not on that path, maybe in an earlier life, isn't ready for this stuff. And then I wrote a huge article on whether the world is ready for this. I mean, it challenges religion. It challenges, the whole basics of what everybody learned, regardless of what religion you are. This is threatening in some ways to that. And then what if it falls into the wrong hands? Who's going to use it? How are they going to use it? There's some real fears there.
Tony, have you ever connected with a really high level being, say, Jesus, Buddha?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. With the way that we believe it works, and it all coming from one universal consciousness, that means we're all one and the same. So levels, and higher beings, what we do know is that in one time asking questions related to that, answers were given that you can raise levels of your consciousness by performing certain tasks, by certain things that you do in life that raise that. And the higher that level, the more information that you can interact with. It's almost along the lines, and the word that the spirit used really shook me up, but he said something along the lines of the higher your level, the more responsibility, or something along that line. I'd have to go back and listen again. But I turned around and said, you mean like a job? And he said, yes, we have jobs. And I was just like, I don't want a job in the afterlife. But apparently there are. The whole learning process never ends.
I totally believe that, actually. I think to those who are given more is expected, maybe I would say, or the responsibility is there.
It goes even beyond the responsibility. It's character. It's what you're going to do with it. Are you going to do the right thing? I think that's part of what life lessons are. Did I do the right thing? Should I have done it differently? They're all learning experiences, not only for us individually, but for universal consciousness. And those are the growth factors. Those are what say, okay, I should have done that differently. If that happens again, I'm going to do this instead. That's how the expansion of individual or universal consciousness grows.
You know, I keep getting this image when you talk, and it's almost as if the universal consciousness is like a fun house, and you walk in and there's mirrors, turned all different ways, layers and layers and layers. And like each reflection is like a spirit or a life that's part of the fun house, just reflecting different aspects of it. And even if you think about the idea of a more evolved spirit, could have more layers of reflection.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And we believe that that does occur based on information that we've been told. It's a never-ending research. For every question we get an answer for, there's 100 more questions behind that answer. And so it just keeps going.
Totally fascinating. I'm assuming that you do live group sessions.
Live as in person, yes.
In-person group sessions. And I'm curious if you do that so that the audience can connect with crossed over loved ones.
Yeah, anytime we do a public event, it's not for us anymore. It is for the people that are there. Like we had a group we were doing one night. People were coming up asking questions. Some would get responses, some would not. And we found that if I turn around and re-ask their question for them, the answer would come through. So there is a connection between the user and the device, and that was shown when Marcello Bacci was tested in lab. They even pulled his vacuum tubes one by one. He still got voices. The only thing they could remove to make the voices stop were Marcello himself. When they removed him, the voices quit. But the gentleman said, "Can I ask a question?" He was probably 10, 12th in line. And I said, "Sure, go right ahead." Well, he asked his question in his Native American language. So we didn't even know what he asked. So I said to my wife, I said, "Let's just let it run. Let's see what happens." And so we're listening, and all of a sudden we saw his eyes go wide and his jaw drop. And I said, "Did you get your answer?" He said, "Not only did I get it, I got it in my Native American language."
Have you connected with any of your crossed over loved ones?
I have. We don't ever share those, though, just because of the personal. I connected with my grandfather. My wife is connected with her mother.
But how lovely that you were able to do that.
Well, the funny part is that when he started speaking to me, I said, "Grandpa, this is your grandson, Tony." And then this response came through. And so I recorded the whole thing. I didn't say a word to my mom. I just sent it. About 2 minutes later, she calls me up. She goes, "That's your grandfather. How did you get this?" So I explained. And I said, "He said, 'Howdy, Tony.'" I said, "Did he used to use that term? Because that's really dated." And my mom said that was his response to anybody that said hello, was "Howdy, whoever," or what. So she goes, "Yeah, that was him."
And so we don't need a machine to talk to spirit. We might need that machine to hear them unless we're a psychic or a medium. Do you have any suggestions for people how they can stay connected with their loved ones?
Absolutely. They are around more than you have any idea. And people will say things like, "Well, are they earthbound?" No, we don't. If they're not confined to time and space, they wouldn't be confined to Earth. They have free will to move anywhere they want at the blink of an eye or thought. They can come and go as they want. You want to stay connected, just think it. They get it from your thought, from your consciousness back to universal consciousness. They know you're thinking about them, and they will find ways to let you know they heard, they understood, and they're there, even without the technology equipment such as static.
They can play with electrical things.
Anything electrical they can manipulate, yes. When you think about it, electrical is energy, frequency, and vibration. If that's what they are, they have full control.
Fascinating. Any last things you'd like to share with us, Tony?
So the only thing I want to say is, and you asked this in regards to a question is, how do you spend all this time trying to communicate with the dead? It's fascinating. It's a learning experience. But let me say one thing, as great as that is, and as fascinating as it is, speak to the people you love now, here on earth, because once they're gone, it's a waiting game to see them again. You will, but it's a waiting game. And to communicate your thoughts and your love and your appreciation of them in your life here and now is the most important.
There's nothing quite like a hug, right?
Exactly. You can't beat it.
And even the quality or length of discussion, like we don't even think about that because we talk human to human and full and complete sentences. Sometimes we read each other's mind, but when you're talking spirit, I mean, you're not sitting there for 20 minutes getting a full discourse, right? You're getting little blips.
It depends on what we ask. Like I said, and again, the universal laws, what they can say, what they can't. But I mean, we've done live sessions for a couple of hours, and then we'll go through and we'll put out a video with just clips of portions of it because nobody wants to sit through 3 hours. But the length of their response will depend on what was asked and what they can share and what they're allowed to share. But sometimes we've had responses come through where we can hear other entities in the background going, you can't tell them that, stop, don't talk anymore. So it's always curious to see what's going to come through every time.
I have one more question, and that would be about, I guess I would call them demons or dark spirits. Have you ever come across any of those in your work?
When we were more into paranormal investigating, which we've also done for 15 years, and we've been to every haunted location almost in the United States, and then we investigated in Japan, the Philippines, crazy locations. There is a dark side. One defines the other. You can't have hot without having cold because one defines the other. You can't have light without dark. It is a connected comparison and value with one within the other. So if you have good, you have to have evil. Do they exist like television and movies portray it? No, it's not an everyday occurrence, but I'm not going to tell you it's not there because it is. So protection when we do this is also very prevalent to making sure that we don't open any doors we don't want, but it's not an everyday occurrence by any means. We've run into dark stuff. Would I ever say I ran into something demonic? No, but 15 years in a eternity is nothing. So, and I hope to be doing this for a lot of years yet to come.
Been absolutely fascinating chatting with you today, Tony. Where can we send people who are interested and would like to learn more?
Sure. I would start probably with our website, which is called entityvoices.com. There is a Staticom section, everything from shows that we've done, presentations we've given, evidence that we've captured. You can go through all that. There's a blog on academic articles I've written on how we believe this works, how Staticom works. I wrote one about how sleep actually pertains to supporting that consciousness is separate from the body. So great information there. You can find me on Facebook under Tony Rathman. If you go to YouTube and just type in Staticom, there are probably 200 clips of evidence all the way back from straight EVPs up to Staticom 3.0.
Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. Come visit me at thoughtchange.com, pick up a copy of Learning to Listen, and we will see you again with some more fascinating exploration next time. That's it for this week. Bye for now.